There. Okay, oh, this came through as a scan, a little wonky there. Sorry for that. So, subject that we're going through today from a training standpoint is kind of tips and tricks on the application itself. Um, there are instances that, quite frankly, are immediate deal killers the second we speak to someone that would be great to know before we invest a lot of time and effort to get them under contract. Um, and quite frankly, that might even hold true, with the listing you would take or any buyers that you would be working with. But without correctly pre-qualifying someone, and certainly, I've heard it through and through Mike Ferry's system and programs, but could not hold any more true on the lending side as well. You take a listing from someone that there are two people on title, and one of the two people is not in agreement to sell, you got a real problem. But from the application standpoint, and I'm going to hit some high points, there's some little nuggets in here that just open up additional options and opportunities for people that maybe a lot of folks haven't even thought about, or weren't even aware of. Maybe didn't ask that one next question. So having said that, I'm going to hit some high points in sections on the application itself, and just talk about really the importance of the information we're gathering, what it means, ultimately what goes into it, and how it affects the lending options. So I'm having a little bit of a problem with the scanner this morning. So yes, sorry for kind of the way that everything's sitting on paper here, but it's still legible. You bet. So on the application itself, aside from simple name, address, things of that nature, I circled some hot points and buttons that affect financing options and opportunities or options that we have. And a lot of times, for further, you're working with someone within our brokerage or working with someone within another lending institution. It doesn't matter how big the company, how experienced the individual is. It really comes down to how thorough anybody is in their information gathering. In this first section over here on the right, when it talks about the citizenship, some people refer to as residency status, matters a ton in our industry. And so much of the time we get caught up on how much money do you make, and what's your credit score, and how much money do you have in the bank, and just miss the mark on, and I hate to say this, but are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a permanent resident alien? Are you what's called a foreign national? Are you here just visiting from another company and thought it'd really be a good idea in order to buy real estate? So no shame on any walk of life. There are programs that are available for additional people. If I got into, and without even digging on the extent of guidelines, there are so many different how shall I say, statuses within the Immigration Naturalization Service that allow people to be in our country, and they all affect different loan programs. So for some of them out there, maybe it requires a little bit more down payment. Maybe it requires, there's going to be a little bit higher interest rate because there's more risk associated with that. If the person's here just on a passport and is a citizen from another country, I'm not saying that we're dead in the water. It just, but it matters. And I'm not going to downplay that. The folks that are out there that want to get down payment assistance, closing cost assistance, all those programs are available, but certainly it's not for someone that's not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident alien. So to get those higher loan to value, limited to no down payment programs, you'd need to drop into one of these first two buckets here for U.S. citizenship or the permanent resident alien, which is a lot of people refer to as the green card. But it's not to say that if you don't fit into each of those two buckets, that we're dead. It's just a matter of realizing what it is that we have, how to structure it and put it together. Did some training yesterday when we talked about this marital status over here. For the most part, when we do business with clients, it's rare that we have two people on the first call. Generally speaking, there's one person that's inquiring. I joked in training yesterday with our loan officers. I don't think it's fair to go back and ask people when you're talking to them, especially on that first call, hey, let's just cut right down to the chase. Are you the information gatherer or are you the decision maker? It's not even a fair question, and it's belittling, because if they're the information gatherer, it's like, feel less than whole. Like, oh boy, you caught me, but ultimately we really want to get with the decision maker. Who's kidding who? So if we're not getting with the decision maker, then it comes down to you're hoping that the information gatherer is selling everything that you're selling with the same passion, intensity, vigor that you otherwise would to the decision maker. You're not going to have as high a chance to close the transaction unless you're dealing with the quote unquote decision maker. If the person's married, excellent, wonderful. Separated, no problem. Unmarried, wonderful. At the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. But what does matter is, am I dealing and am I communicating with the parties to the transaction, or am I hoping that my message carries well? When we were kids, and I even have seen it on some adult parties where people play that proverbial telephone game where you start a message around a table, it goes around maybe 20 people, and what's the message at the end? And it's never the same, ever. Doesn't matter if you're talking about young kids or if you're talking about mature adults, but the fact of the matter holds true in our industry as well. There could be something that's very compelling, that's an excellent feature and or sales tactic or piece that we think is gonna get them to work with us, that never gets shared with the decision maker. Okay, so certainly marital status matters a ton. And if you're married in the lending industry, we're in a community property state here in California, your spouse, whether they're on the transaction or not on the transaction, is going to need to sign some paperwork. They don't have to be on the loan, but there's going to be some disclosures they're going to need to acknowledge. Grant deed or quitclaim deed at the end of the transaction, deeding or transferring their interest as a married person to our borrower as a married person, sole and separate. So there's going to need to be some buy-in. If you're a married individual and your spouse is traveling South America on a bicycle with no cell phone, it's a big deal, because that person is they're completely off the grid. So from the standpoint, once again, of knowing what we're dealing with, if you came back to me and said, a bicycle, let's even dumb it down and say they're riding a skateboard from the northern tip of South America to the southern tip, and they think it's going to be the best experience in their life. That's wonderful. When are they going to be back? September. We're probably dealing, with maybe under contract sometime in August, but they're going to need to be around and available in order to get something done. If you have no communication with that person, big deal. Certain programs also, such as FHA, if you are married, sole and separate, requires the spouse's credit be run. Same with VA. The government loans that are out there, you can apply in your name only as a married individual, but the government agencies believe that the spouse's debt should be considered as household debt, and they're going to require that that person's credit be run as well. Not for the credit score, only for the household debt, and they have to qualify with whatever debt for FHA and VA loans in both parties' names. All right. Silly stuff here with regards to where people work and how much money they make. But I circled this or put a little asterisk over here. How people get compensated matters a ton in the lending side of things. Not like, oh, I'm self-employed, I make about $10,000 a month. That's terrible, terrible information. We want to know based on the tax return information, get a little bit more nitty gritty. Even if you, I work at Longo Toyota. Oh, what do you do for work? Oh, I'm in sales. That's wonderful. How do you get compensated? Do you get a base pay? Do you get overtime? Do you have any bonuses? Are you paid commission? I came into a car dealership in Long Beach. Echo Park is the name of I think it's Citrus Hill, if I'm not mistaken. But they do not pay their salespeople with any commission. Everybody's flat salary. And they could care less if you buy a car or don't. They don't get paid any more money. They're not upselling you for anything. So it's not even to say if I'm in car sales that I necessarily even get commissions. Some others may say, well, you're all commission. So relative to how people get compensated. What's your compensation package? How do you get paid? Certainly we need to back it up with core info. This little quote I put down here at the bottom, and I've said this like hundreds and maybe even 1,000 or more times over the years. In fairness, I could really care less what's on the application as long as it's correct info. So it doesn't even matter if you have a job or don't have a job, you have money in the bank or no money in the bank. I mean, whatever it is, you're a US citizen or not a US citizen, I don't even care. As long as you're giving me truthful info. But what gets compromising, especially on the lending side, is if I'm not getting true and correct info, then it's basically like a ticking time bomb. You're just waiting for that thing to explode at some point in the transaction. And somebody through some background check, QC audit, I mean, there's so much. We're in the age of technology. To think that you're married and you're not going to disclose it, the fact of the matter is, it might explode in your face somewhere down the road, and we're so deep into the transaction where maybe it compromises your EMD, but certainly it would compromise everyone's time and effort by working on a transaction that was never meant to be from the day we wrote or initially even spoke to them, for that matter. So like I say, I mean, the application itself, and I mentioned every borrower, anybody, and from a training standpoint, everything that clients tell us as lenders, I will use to their benefit. I'm never going to screw anybody out of anything. Whatever you tell me, I'm going to use it for the best possible financing, the most favorable options for your situation. And I'm never going to lay you out like, I got you now, you're screwed. So just from the standpoint of really, taking good quality info, that old adage, kind of shit in, shit out, couldn't be any more true in our industry. Amen to that. All right. This is really good. And I put this application together here for a reason. This is on the standard 1003, but I'm just going to bounce in and out of different types of income sources. And as much as we talk to people about how they get paid, there's a lot of different types of income that's usable in our industry. And as much as people, and I'll get to this unemployment benefits over here and discuss it as well, but sometimes we just hit in our industry, and it could be even our competition, just hits the high points. Oh, what's your job? Where do you work? How much do you get paid? And we're only talking about that one thing. Rather than, is there any other sources of income, anything else at all that might help us get into the home that you want and get you to be qualified so well that the transaction is very smooth and easy. And these are all alphabetical, but certainly alimony is a no-brainer. If you have a contractual court order for income, absolutely usable. If you got the buddy system where, well, I get the alimony, but there's no court order, not usable. So, in fairness, the reason why it's not usable is if you offend the other individual and do something that, you said you were gonna meet them for a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you stood them up, and they get upset and they say, well, I'm not going to give you the money that I've been giving you. Well, you have no legal remedy to go back and say, no, you have to give me the money. In the mortgage industry, we want to know it's binding. We want to know it's ongoing. So this alimony has to be court order. The automobile allowance that a lot of people that do outside sales get, absolutely usable. So it's money that's coming to you that helps offset expenses you incur. The next border income, you have people that live with you. I don't have a multi-unit. I don't have a casitas. I don't have a granny flat. I don't have an ADU. I just have people and I rent out rooms. Could we use room rent or border income? You could, as long as it's shown to the IRS on tax returns. I could use it also if I'm going on a program that allows for bank statements for income, because it's going to show as long as you're depositing it in the bank. So just because it's not a traditional second unit or traditional income producing property, we can use room rent, but I just need to see that it's verifiable. There's capital gains that are in here. Capital gains are absolutely usable in our industry. It's got to be ongoing. So what does that mean? It means that I need to see it on the tax returns. You have a history of it. And it's not, well, I inherited money from my grandparents and it was in a Schwab account or whoever, Merrill Lynch, pick anybody that's out there, doesn't even matter. And then I decided to sell that and I paid the cap gains on it. If it was a one-off and you had one account and that's it, and it's not recurring or likely to recur, not usable, but certainly for people that are buying, selling on an ongoing basis all day long. And you would need to show that you have liquid assets or money still right now, you know, if I'm trading, but a history of buying and selling, no problem. Child support, next one in here, same as alimony, absolutely usable as long as you have a court order. So once again, on the buddy-buddy system, and I hate to say this, but the same with if you don't have a court order that mandates child support be paid, and then let's say you got a kid and you got a kid together and we're good. I get this money. We're fine. You don't want to go through courts. It's a really big deal. Everything's fine. We're chill. I get that. But if it turns out that there's a difference of opinion and once again, one person is offended and then you want to go after the courts, the first thing that they're going to do with regards to child support payments and through the court system, family court system, is they're going right after blood tests. And if it turns out that the quote unquote baby daddy ain't the real daddy, you're not getting child support. You know, it could be that, oops, I'm so sorry. I just, so for all the, you know, well wishes, also got to be court ordered. Disability income in here, and there's certain things out there, disability would be one of them, has to continue for 3 or more years from funding. So we can use disability income as long as it's ongoing. It's not going to be maternity disability. You know, I'm out of maternity right now. I don't know anybody that gets maternity disability for 3 or more years. Okay, so it has to be a long-term disability. Foster care, absolutely usable. People that get foster care incomes, non-taxable, but it's still ongoing and usable income. And speaking of which, anything that is non-taxable income, Social Security over here to the right also. A lot of people get Social Security income, non-taxable. Our industry allows you to gross up and use more than what the person actually receives. So it's very lucrative for non-taxable income. This housing income or parsonage, what the heck's that? Base area housing is great for military people. BAH, it shows on their LES as their leave and earnings statement. It's their pay stub. But we can use the housing allowance for military people. If you have anybody that's in any religious order, you know, it doesn't matter the religion, and they get paid a housing allowance, absolutely usable. So it's income, whether it's taxable or not taxable. If you can show that they get it and it's ongoing, you're a pastor in a church, I'm a youth minister, whatever the case may be, if you're getting that, it's ongoing, done, done, done. Interest and dividend income, also usable, as long as you show that you have an average of getting it over time. It would show on the tax returns. You need to show that you have money in the bank to show that this is likely to continue and be recurring. Mortgage credit certificate, MCC, is in through some lower income people. It's rare, but also usable. This mortgage differential payments, very, very slim. There are some loan modifications or otherwise. There are some subsidies that people get for income. We had, and this is common in lower income areas, HUD has got a Section 8 that supplements what a renter actually pays in comparison to what the landlord gets. So we can use that additional subsidy that comes in through Section 8. That is true income and it's verifiable. Notes receivable, absolutely, as long as they're continuing for 3 or more years. Just like the disability, the note receivable has to continue for 3 or more years in order to use it for qualifying. Any public assistance, got to show that it's ongoing. Any retirement, as long as you're getting an ongoing benefit, has to continue for 3 or more years. Some people that retire in the public sector, not some, the people that retire in the public sector, city, state, county, they have lifetime pension benefits. People who retire in the private sector, such as us, Whatever you save for your pension, or excuse me, for your retirement account is what you're otherwise going to draw on down the road. So if I've saved $100,000 and I've decided to take $10,000 a month, well, your retirement's not usable in our industry because it's going to go away in 10 months. It's not going to continue for 3 or more years. If I'm taking $2,000 a month, 3 years is 36 months. That's $72,000. I show I have 100,000 in it. I can use the $2,000. So the retirement's got to show that it's continuing for 3 or more years. And we get benefits letters or award letters to show that. Any royalty payments, as long as it's 3 or more years, separate maintenance, ongoing, contractually bound, Social Security, lucrative when it's non-taxable, trust income. A lot of people in affluent areas, LA County, Orange County, even every now and again, I'll get one in Riverside or San Bernardino. But if you get family money and trust money, absolutely usable. Got to make sure it's ongoing for 3 or more years. Whoever is the executor of the trust would identify how much is in the trust and whether the income's ongoing. This unemployment benefits is very misleading. I'm not going to, spend any time on it because I don't know any unemployment's continuing for 3 or more years. And this usually bounces out. VA compensation, absolutely. I'm up for any other income that anybody makes for any reason. Happy to discuss every single thing that possibly could be out there. We have lenders right now that are. It used to be in our industry, even though the voters passed that medical marijuana proposition years ago, and even though it's legal in the state, the mortgage industry only in the last year has programs now that will accept income that is derived from the cannabis industry. But it also is now out there. It used to be that was not acceptable income, and you'd have to, basically go into a different type of loan program. So from the income standpoint, like I say, lots of options. It isn't anything where we're just, narrow the scope and we can only use the job they're working. Supplemental income goes a long way. This, what we call liquid assets in the mortgage industry is money that you have available to you. So many originators that are out there ask, what do you have in checking and savings? They're going to hit the top 2. And I think for most clients out there, if you ask me what was in the checking account, most people it'd be little to nothing because I get no return on that. The interest rate is like 0.01%. Most people use their checking account to pay bills. It's rare that I see a lot of money sitting in the checking account. It is what it is. So if I only ask for checking and savings, and those are the only 2 statements I got, look at all the other things we just missed the boat on. About 10 other items in there, we just completely fell flat on our face and didn't verify and or didn't ask. And there are some clients out there, if you had asked me for my money market account, I would have given it to you. You only asked me for checking and savings. What do you want from me? I don't do this stuff for a living. How am I supposed to know that you needed that? So once again, money market accounts, any bank CDs, some bank CDs that are out there, if you take it out early, there's a penalty. Some of them, none. Some of them, maybe you forego the interest earned, but you still get, your balance back. So maybe the purchase of the house is more important than the CD that is floating out there. Longer people put money in bank CDs, higher interest rate you get. Tie up your money for 1 year, 2 year, 3, 5 years, you get a higher rate of return. So it's not to say that you can't tap into it though. Mutual funds that are out there, stocks have to be publicly traded stocks. It can't be, example is Greg's computer service. Well, that's great that Greg owns 100% of that. And it's great that Greg's accountant says that the value of the stock is worth 50 grand. I hate to say it, but nobody cares, Greg, because Greg's computer service is not publicly traded, and we can't reach out and quantify what does that stock trade for. So stocks can only be used if they're publicly traded, and we can quantify the value of the stock. Oh, sorry for that. Stock options definitely usable. Bonds that are out there usable. Any retirement accounts, Only exception of retirement accounts that are not usable. The state teachers retirement system is STRS. The acronym is STRS. And the public employee retirement system, acronym is PERS, PERS. But the money that's in STRS and PERS is not available to the client or the borrower unless you either quit that job, then you can get it, or you retire. So the powers that be that created those particular retirement accounts didn't allow their constituents, for lack of a better term, to go through the retirement income. They're like, no, this is for your retirement, and therefore we're going to make sure that you don't bleed it dry, no matter how much you might otherwise need it, and it's there for you when you retire. Bridge loan proceeds, this will go with anything. Any other loan that you take out, all that's doable. So money in the bank, I mean, you could draw money on a credit card if you wanted to. Some people are like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. Yeah, it just means that you got to qualify with whatever the payment based on the credit card balance is. But if you need money and you're short to close, you put it on a credit card, big deal. You got to find out what is the payment associated with the money that I'm drawing on anything. So on any bridge loan, any cash out loan, any personal loan, credit card, anything at all that's out there, just got to make sure you're hitting for that payment and qualifying. Individual development, the IRA, IDA, they're all usable. Trust accounts, absolutely usable. There are two types of life insurance. One of them that builds cash value and the other one that does not. And just to keep it super simple, if you or your client is invested in a life insurance that builds cash value to it, that's usable as a liquid asset. There's something you can reach out and grab. So definitely more than just your standard, what's a checking, what's a savings. Coming down through here, we'd be remiss in not talking about any other properties people own. And a lot of times they're like, oh, I own land, I own this, I got that. I mean, but is it really a big deal? The fact of the matter is, once lenders are doing their background searches, they're probably going to find them. Might as well address it up front. What's the harm of owning land? Is there really anything to that? I mean, it's just land. It's not even developed. It's unimproved. And on raw land, if I own it free and clear, what would be, what I'll tell you is, number one, there's no insurance. There's nothing to insure. There's no improvements. There's no insurance on raw land. And the tax rate's going to be pennies on the dollar because it's unimproved. So the assessed value is going to be chump change. So you're going to have some property taxes you're going to include in qualifying, but nothing else. So additional properties matters. We can take people, if you're vacating, let's say husband and wife are separating and or divorcing, and they have an FHA loan on that current property. You can use, if you're departing residence, you can use the FHA eligibility for the new home purchase, and that borrower can have 2 FHA loans. So as long as I'm knowing, what their name is on and what properties they have ownership to, matter of just realizing that and then structuring the deal accordingly. Bear with me. All right. So there's this declaration section that is in the application as well. And not only is the application taken up front, but it's also signed with loan documents. And some borrowers, might read it through at the time of loan documents. Other people might, hey, big deal, just sign right here. No brainer. The yes or no questions in here, and what I would propose to all of our loan officers is ask these questions of our borrower and not at a point where we're just hazarding guesses, because they're really important. And it could be that some of them are deal killers. Will you occupy as your primary residence and restructuring as a primary residence? You'd like to think the answer to that's yes. Sounds silly, but yeah. If it's yes, if you had ownership in the last 3 years, First-time home buyers defined by ownership in the last 3 years. So no home ownership in the last 3 years, you're a first-time home buyer. There might be some programs that get you into some more lucrative financing. What type of property you owned? They got some options in there. And how did you hold property? Some options in there. Okay. If it's a purchase, do you have any family relationship or business affiliation with the seller? They want to know if it's an arm's length transaction or not. It matters. So, if you hazard a guess and it's wrong and the borrower is signing it, congratulations. It's called fraud because you've signed something and misrepresented yourself. Are you borrowing any money for this real estate transaction or obtaining any money from another party, such as seller or realtor, that you've not disclosed in the app? So they want to know if you're a borrower. If you're taking from Peter to pay Paul, they want to know it. They want to know if there's any estimated or expected repayment, rather, or if it's gifted money. But you can't get gifted money from a party to the transaction. So they want to know yes or no on that. If so, how much? Really big, letter D, have you or will you be applying for a mortgage loan or another property, not secure property secured by this loan, on or before closing this transaction that's not disclosed? Have you or will you be applying for any new credit on or before closing this loan that's not disclosed? What they're basically saying is, and there are some people that will take cash out refi to immediately put it for down payment on a new purchase. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you got to disclose that such that you're being hit for both payments and not at a point where you're sandbagging the lender and you're not letting them know, and then you're incurring additional debt. Will this property be subject to a lien that can take priority over a first mortgage lien, such as clean energy lien paid through your property taxes? I mean, they're not as prevalent anymore. But there used to be a lot of those opportunities and options that were out there that just throw it against the property taxes, but they did have lien precedent. It's going to come out. So all this will be verified prior to closing. All I'm saying is, wouldn't it be nice to know up front if that were the case? And if they didn't know, they could ask, ask the agent, ask the listing agent. Are you a cosigner or guarantor on any debt that's not disclosed? So we co-signed for somebody else, didn't show on the credit report, it's a yes or no. Ultimately, if you reply yes to this, or excuse me, no to this, and then turns out you default on the loan 6 months or a year later, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, no big deal. And you come back like, oh yeah, I co-signed for my cousin and they didn't make the payment. I had to make that mortgage payment, this mortgage payment. Now I'm late. End all sale is, if you are not truthful on the application, the lender's recourse is they can call the note and immediately make it due and payable. And all the loan amount, figure it out, pay me my money, or I'm foreclosing on it. Are there any outstanding judgments against you? Are you currently delinquent or in default on any federal debt? This could be student loans. It could be IRS back owed taxes. It's not the end of the world if you have that, but you need to be in a payment plan. And it needs to be a written payment plan. You got to qualify with that payment. Are you a party to a lawsuit in which you potentially have any personal financial liability? Yes or no? They want to know. Are you all of a sudden, you got some heavy cloud hanging over your head that could wreck you and ruin you financially? Jay, have you conveyed title to any property in lieu of foreclosure in the past 7 years? Okay. In the past 7 years, have you completed pre-foreclosure sale or short sale, where the property is sold to a third party and the lender agreed to accept less than the outstanding mortgage balance due? So anybody that goes into pre-foreclosure, notice of default, notice of trustee sale, the second any of that happens, in our industry, it's considered a foreclosure, and our seasoning, which is that 7-year mark, starts when the property sells, not when the initial notice of default is filed. So they got to wait for the sale date on that property. It was a really long time. You go back to those that have been in the industry for a while, 07, 08. There were people that went into pre-foreclosure, notice of default, notice of trustee sale, hanging in there, trying to modify it. It could be that the NOD was filed 3 or 4 years before the home eventually sold. Well, then your clock didn't start ticking until it eventually sold, not when you first had the NOD filed. Have you had a property foreclosed in the last 7 years? Have you declared bankruptcy within the last 7 years? Okay. I profess to every one of our loan officers, make sure the borrowers answer and address the questions. Do not answer them for them. We get into a real pickle when, when we're just plugging in, oh, I'm sure that this is, no, 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 no. We don't want to rattle the lender. If we answered yes to some of these, man, what are they going to think? Or maybe they won't do the deal. So by not answering truthfully, the client is misrepresenting themselves, and at the end of the day, can find themselves in a world of hurt. And rarely is, if anybody, with regards to a mortgage loan, if the lender comes back and calls a note, very few people have the financial ability to just write a check and get out from under the mortgage balance. Very few. Last section in here at the end are people's ethnicity and race. And a lot of folks would say, I do not wish to furnish the info. Okay. And we get that all the time. As lenders, we're supposed to respond or reply with whatever we think the answer is, or whatever we think their ethnicity or race is. The whole nature of this is not profiling people. It's the exact opposite. And it keeps lenders honest to ensure they're not discriminating on any class of people. And it could be anything. It could be, and it is what it is. I happen to be male and I happen to be white, Caucasian. So it's not like, well, if every white male is declined and every native Hawaiian female is approved, well, what the heck's happening with that lender? And if you have certain classes that actually they're being declined and have better qualifications than other classes that are being approved, that's a problem. So the federal regulators go after this. Home Mortgage Disclosure Act was instituted to ensure that lenders are out there are not profiling, discriminating against certain class of people. And the term redlining is prevalent. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, even when it gets into, the choices for Asian individuals, Asian, Indian, Chinese, Filipino, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese. We had another recently just funded Monday that was from Thailand. So it's all relative. They have different options right below here, but, that's kind of a catch-all. But we're supposed to complete that information and not at a point where we just, kind of kick it to the curb and say, oh, no big deal. I will say, and for those that went to the Mike Ferry event last week, always picking up nuggets of info. And I was sitting right next to Jack Ma, and Mike brought up Jack as an example, and he's a very successful real estate agent. He does a good book of business, and what was the nature of what he brought up with him? The nature of what he brought up with him was sometimes in our industry, we offer an overabundance of information and just give just a plethora of information and just push it on our clients and don't ask questions to the extent where we're giving them information that's pinpointed for their situation. So really kind of in essence, you kind of get diarrhea of the mouth. You just offer them just an abundance of info. Some of it might pertain to them. Some of it might be sensical, doesn't pertain to them at all. And there were a handful of things that really, the Mike's presentation last week is how to be a good listing agent. I don't do any real estate. I do loans only. I've always only done 33 years, 34 next month. That's my bread and butter, but from the standpoint of just being wide-eyed and listening to what other people are suggesting and information that they're throwing out there, there are 3 or 4 good nuggets of information that I walked away with in that particular seminar, discussion, call it whatever it is you want. I don't know if it's necessarily a sales retreat, but good quality info and good nuggets of info that come from that as well, that can help enhance my business and our business, as a brokerage. But from the standpoint of good quality info, we did have a newer loan officer with us that had experience and was discussing different opportunities, and we got a huge product offering. And I suggest if you want to go out and hit the new builds and the new tract housing, they're going to do the sweet spot in that straight A paper. A very small bucket is what people are going to fit into. But anything that's outside of this bucket, if it drops in here, 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 anything outside of that bucket, probably not going to be it for them. Would they like to sell the house? I think they would. Would they be able to offer the financing? They would not. You know, it could be anything. It could be an individual taxpayer identification number, ITIN. They're not going to do that. It could be somebody that doesn't meet the D or LP automated underwriting. You don't get the approve eligible. It's got to go manual underwrite. They're not going to do that, period. So I went out and pitched them on that. And the very first deal that came in happened to be an FHA loan the builder couldn't do. Our loan officer was very excited. Everything's rocking and rolling. We're getting down. Appraisal gets done. The loan officer had just been on with us a matter of a couple of weeks. First deal that they got in through that builder turned out that the individual is not a U.S. citizen and not a permanent resident alien. So with that said, they're also not getting the FHA loan. You know, so they didn't have the money to come in with any other option. It blew up in a New York second. Is what it is. I mentioned to the loan officer at the time, and I said, you know, in our industry, and you got to just take it to heart, you're as good as the last loan you did. Nobody's resting on, well, I've done 1,000 loans perfectly. That doesn't necessarily mean the next 1,000 are going to go equally as well. You know, and I think usually with our referral sources, you're as good as your last loan. You're as good as your last deal. I mentioned to him, you can go back out and talk to him. You can apologize. You're not going to be able to dress that up. And at the end of the day, you're probably never going to get another deal from that particular builder. You know, is what it is. But it's probably also never going to happen to you again. You will never not ask that question again. You know, so put it up on the board, mark it down as you know, the cost of doing business or the trials and tribulations of life. But yeah, I mean, one of those things where, you know, sometimes you got to kind of, you know, people got to learn by a little bit more of the school of hard knocks. I see Patty Billings Malone on the call, and Patty had a client that she asked me to do a cross qual, and I'm happy to do that for any of you guys that are listing agents. I'll do cross quals for you, no problem, free, no problem. She's got a listing that's up in the LA area. I think it's in San Fernando Valley, and the buyer came in. The loan officer representing the buyer called me. I told him exactly what I need: proof of all income, proof of down payment, a copy of the automated underwriting, copy of the credit report. If I get that, I'll be able to do your cross qual. It's going to take me maybe 6 minutes, 7 minutes tops. He was fighting me like from the second I talked to him. Started talking about all the experience in the industry, and I shouldn't have to get this to you, and was talking like talking all the talk. But from the standpoint of getting me the information needed, you know, just not coming around. And what his first name was Kerry. What did Kerry then turn the tables on me? And as he said, "Oh, you're a Century 21 Masters. I know Neil Schwartz, and Neil knows me. You need to call Neil. He'll vouch for me." You know, quite frankly, I'm not going to waste my time, and I'm not going to waste Neil's time. Are you kidding me? And I didn't want to fight with him about it. I did share the conversation with Patty in its entirety. You know, but I mentioned to him, and I've mentioned to everyone alike, you know, we're all as good as our last deal. You could have done 100 deals well with Neil. You know, but does this buyer qualify? Is this buyer going to move forward? So that's great. You know, most of the people that are on the call have done a deal or two. They've been in the industry for a minute or two. Wonderful. But we're all as good as the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. And that's what makes our industry so how shall I say, challenging, enriching, you know, wonderful. You know, we're not working in some manufacturing plant with a assembly line, and we're just the same. Ugh. Or we're clock watching, just can't wait to get the heck to the end of the business day so I can go home. You know, the reality of things is it's a good challenge, and every transaction is going to be unique unto itself. And that really is what holds true when I talk about this application. That's what holds true with the application as well. I've never taken two applications that are exactly the same, ever. Every single person out there is different than the next. You know, accept that for what it is. Every buyer is going to be different than the next. Every seller is going to be different than the next. No two people are alike. So everybody gets that individual treatment. But for the standpoint of a couple of the pitfalls and things maybe to be looking out for, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And if we're catching, good quality info, trust me when I say, well, I'm going to put together the best options that are available. And if they don't want to move forward based on the most favorable financing options available to them, then I got to just be honest. Another client that I spoke to earlier today is in the entertainment industry and is affected by the current strike. There's going to be options available for that person right now. They're going to be able to move forward if they want to. And I'm going to be able to structure that deal, not necessarily with the money they get through the union and in that particular side of the industry, but I'll put together with 25% down payment options for financing. Then it comes down to, does the buyer want to move forward? Do they say, you know what, that makes sense to me. Everything you're telling me is spot on. Yeah, I want to buy. And when I get the union job back, can that person refinance and get into more favorable financing? Yeah, all day long. So maybe it takes a two-step. But been talking to that particular borrower, and I asked, have you identified a problem or a property, or have you been out looking? Oh yeah, I got the product. It's exactly perfect for me. So highly motivated to move forward on this one particular property, based on the features that it has to offer. And quite frankly, I'm going to put together the best that I have. So I already touched base on a 3-way call with the borrower and the CPA in order to get the information we need. So from the standpoint of putting, our best foot forward, that's really what it's all about. That is the crux of the information I have for you all today. I didn't put my contact information on the sheet that I sent out, but for anybody that's new into the call, I'll put it into the chat box. And if you have any questions or anything that pops up, certainly give me a call anytime. Yeah, but let me know if I can help you with anything. Happy to do so. Appreciate your guys' time.